Hello all sentient beings and welcome to Transmissions Alt Mode, where we talk about all news, comics, and media related to the... On this episode of Transmissions Alt Mode, we interview Transformers War for Cybertron producers FJ DeSanto and Matt Murray. Today is Friday, January 1st, 2021. Hey, we made it, fellas. And this is Transmissions Alt Mode.
Welcome to another special episode of Transmissions. This is our interview with the showrunners of War for Cybertron, Earthrise. I'm your host, Charles, aka Big C, and I'm joined by the excellent Transmissions team. Jeremy, aka Yakko.
Hello.
And Daryl, the Cybertronian Beast.
How's it going? Let's talk Transformers.
All right, and we are welcome FJ DeSanto and Matt Murray, showrunner and producer of the Netflix Transformers War for Cybertron series. We've had FJ on before. We had him on for Siege, and Siege seemed to be do pretty well with Netflix. A lot of people watch it. I think folks enjoyed it, and we're happy to have them back for Earthrise. And thanks both FJ and Matt for joining us.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having us. And thanks for, I brought Matt this time because he's much smarter than I am and keeps the machine running, so to speak.
None of that is true, but I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, he keeps the operation running. So,
as we talked before, he's apparently keeps you in line. In terms of
No, he's the one who gets me to behave, but that's a whole other story. He's basically my bodyguard or babysitter, depending on what day it is and what the problem is.
Sometimes psychiatrist.
My handler. Yeah, occasional shrink also.
Yeah.
All right. Well, fair warning, we are going to be getting into spoiler territory for both Siege and Earthrise. But the Earthrise stuff we'll keep to the end. But I think Siege has been out for about 6 months now. So I think hopefully you've watched it. If you're watching this interview, hopefully you've already watched Siege and you're getting ready to watch Earthrise. You've already watched Earthrise, since that should be out by the time this goes up. But fair warning. So let's jump right in. And of course, Siege is, I think I would justifiably say it was a hit with Netflix. It got pretty high in the rankings. So are you guys pleased with the response?
I'm more pleased with, you never find out exactly how many people watched, et cetera, because, this is the age of streaming. But what we do know is, did really well review-wise and fan-wise. And, and I think it did its job of being that love letter to the core audience and opening some doors for new ones. We heard a lot of families watched it, a lot of kids watched it, which was a big surprise. We tried to skew it a little older than the usual stuff. I couldn't be happier with the response. People always have problems with things, but in terms of reviews and talking to people about it, they're relatively happy. And I think, as I mentioned last time, I think the series gets better as it keeps going. I think, I'm sure we're going to talk about Earthrise, which I just think the whole show goes like this. It escalates action-wise and story-wise, and I'm really proud of Siege and what it did.
Yeah,
awesome.
I saw it got up to like 5 or 6 on the Netflix rankings, like the first week. So that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think there's an audience for it. Look, people I think are hungry for Transformers, and I'm proud of what Polygon did visually, and I think that really, captured a lot of people. And as you'll see, you guys have seen Earthrise, but even in Kingdom, it gets more colorful and interesting and dynamic. So I think by the time all three are out, I think it's going to have a long life on Netflix where people are going to, want to see this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Now, Matt, we got FJ's history with the Transformers franchise and where he came from in our first interview back in July. So maybe you could give us a little bit of your personal history with Transformers. Did you come in as a longtime fan, and what brought you into Transformers and what keeps you in Transformers?
So I'm a Beast Wars kid. just purely due because of my age, basically. Like that was just the show for me when I was growing up. So I had a lot of those toys and I watched that show all the time. And every kid, even if you didn't watch G1, knows who Optimus Prime is, knows who Megatron is. And I'll never forget, like, when the Beast Wars started crossing over into that G1 history and you saw Optimus on screen in the Ark, and like it just blew my little brain at the time. I was like, whoa, like I didn't understand all the nuance of the mythology, but just the idea that a show could cross over with another show like that was just so interesting at the time. So that just sort of sparked my interest in Transformers. And then, throughout the years, I've tried to catch up on as much Transformers as possible. Obviously, there's a lot of it out there, and I've not seen every single iteration, but I've always just had a deep appreciation for the franchise. And, I think it's a franchise that is so interesting because it always is able to find a uniqueness to it in every iteration. Like there's very few franchises that can constantly reinvent itself. And it's such a great franchise to be part of that I'm just really excited to be here.
Awesome. So after Beast Wars, I mean, that hooked you as a kid. Did you follow Transformers as you got older, or is this something where you just came back to it recently?
Sort of. I sort of fell off a little bit because, I'm a video gamer and I was a teenager, and, there was other things that caught my interest at the time. And then it was sort of one of those things that like, it sort of re-sparked my interest getting back into it, catching up on things I had missed and stuff like that. So it's definitely something I've fallen back into and really grown to appreciate. Like I said, all the different iterations, especially the 86 movie. I think that thing it still holds up so well today.
Yeah, that's definitely a high point of the whole Transformers universe.
It's got the best soundtrack of any.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned the reaction from fans and reviews and everything. How about Hasbro and Netflix? Are they happy with how the show's doing and the response?
Yeah, I mean they seem to be. I mean, we're knee deep in Kingdom now, and everybody's super supportive. I think, from a Hasbro point of view, I think they're over the moon about it. Especially because, as I'm sure we talked about last time, we worked so closely with the brand to align with the toys and what they were doing. So I think from a Hasbro point of view, they're super happy. I mean, look, we deal with them every day. And Netflix has always been great with us with this and super supportive. And especially as you can see with the recent trailers for Earthrise, and by the time this comes out, there's going to be a couple of posters that'll have come out that are really cool. And they've done a great job marketing it in terms of understanding the audience, working with Hasbro to sort of, get it out there, et cetera. So, everybody's enthusiasm seems to increase as we keep working on it, which is really great. And it allows, Matt and I and the team, especially in Japan, to just have the confidence to keep doing what we're doing, building on it. And I think that's going to pay off in a big way by the time this is all done. And I'm saying this now, like I said, we're knee deep into Kingdom. We sort of know we have the light at the end of the tunnel. We know how it's going to wrap up, how it's going to end. And we're feeling really good about it and really feeling strong that we're going to have a payoff and throw a lot of curveballs in between, as you guys have seen in Earthrise, that people aren't going to expect. And I think find really satisfying also.
Cool.
You mentioned these new posters that you got coming out. These things don't happen to, perhaps spell out a hidden fourth
there's no hidden in that one.
show that this Kingdom might lead into, eh? Huh?
No. That was a really smart thing that Netflix and Hasbro sort of came up with because, as you guys know, and I'm talking a little bit out of school here. I mean, you know how quick these toy lines leak, and the stuff gets out there. Oh, it's going to be this and that. So that was they were sort of taking those opportunities, Hasbro and Netflix, to really help each other and sort of like, hey, we can control the narrative on announcing Kingdom and all that stuff, and hiding those things in there and all that. And I think that's a lot of fun. Like, it's very much our mentality when we, create the show with the writers and the animators. It's like, how do we service the whole brand? How do we make this the franchise? So I love that sort of connective tissue. And also, the one thing I've sort of learned to love in this process, especially around Siege, is, now everybody knows where it's going. You know what I mean? Like, we were talking off air before this, where when the screeners go out, and, for the first one, Netflix came to me and said, all right, we're going to send the screeners out. What do you not want spoiled? And I wrote a laundry list, which in retrospect was sort of like, well, who cares? Like, they know what Earthrise is. And so when we got to Earthrise, like, just don't talk about the last episode. And they were like, okay. And I think it makes it more fun for you guys, makes it more fun for the fans to get it out there. Like, oh, these characters are in it and all that stuff. And I'm less precious about it, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm confident in the show itself.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Not letting us talk about Optimus Prime and Siege was too restrictive.
Yeah, well, don't talk about anything Optimus does or Megatron, and don't mention anything that happens on Cybertron.
Yeah.
Oh, you mentioned the planet's name. You can't do that.
Yeah, you don't even
Spoilers.
figure out the whole mercenary thing. Like, I'm scared of you whenever you start to speculate. You figured out half the show from a card game.
I got a whole list of stuff here I got to go through.
One thing that did cause a little bit of controversy when Siege came out was just an issue with the voice actors, like just having a new crop of voice actors, and a lot of fans, and even, I mean, it was surprising to see some of the actual, some of the previous voice actors just mention, why didn't we get some of the old actors coming back? Why is there a completely new crop of talent here? Is there anything you want to say to address that?
Yeah, I mean, look, the idea was a fresh start, and we made that decision really early on to have a mostly new cast, because it's a prequel. It takes place long before G1 in our minds, and this was not like something that was imposed. It was a conversation between all the parties to sort of go, all right, this is a relatively fresh slate. And they're only really, we used some of the actors from Cyberverse and things like that, especially Jake, who plays Optimus, because we were treading into similar story territory in Cyberverse. And also, as I'm sure you guys can figure out now with Kingdom and all this stuff, they now have this idea that there's a Transformers multiverse, which we sort of hint at in Earthrise, which I might have spoiled too much, but obviously, Kingdom's coming. But you know what I mean? Kingdom's coming. So,
Matt's
if you've seen
out over there.
I mean,
like there'll be a text like "shut up." And
that is pretty much in the trailer. I mean, it's
yeah.
not,
That's what I'm worried about. But the point being is, like, no matter what, I always wanted Tadaro and Marnoka to come back because I felt like they represented that sort of new wave of voice actors. Like they were so good. Like, I know a lot of people don't like, have issues with the Power of the Primordial trilogy. I do too. But the two things that sort of were great that came out of that were Marnoka and Tadaro. So, even from the second this show, for War for Cybertron was being entertained, I was always very adamant, like, okay, those two are coming back no matter what. So you're sort of building that, in that new, that new generation of it. And it's no disrespect to anybody who came before. Where, as you can tell, we try to honor it as best as possible, but also to fit the story and start with a clean slate. And that's why we brought Jake in, because, he was their Optimus in, he's the current Optimus, I think, is he in Rescue Bots also, but he's Cyberverse also, and, finding somebody who can do that voice is very, very, very difficult. But we wanted something different. And again, it's no disrespect to anybody who came before, but it was a decision to as go with as clean a slate as possible to do this version of the franchise. And, and I didn't want it to be a mishmash of old actor, new actor, et cetera. And then everybody's going, well, you got this guy, but why not this guy? And all that stuff. And again, it was just, it's always meant, as everything with this, was to honor the franchise and not disrespect it. And I understand people, like Matt talks about, he grew up with Beast Wars. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have the, no offense, Matt, he didn't come into this with the affinity for G1 that I would, as being alive when it first happened, right? And he knows Beast Wars better than I do. So, it was sort of an interesting thing, because that's where his heart is, especially, again, I'm sure we'll do this the third time we talk about Kingdom, and we'll talk about Matt's particular contribution to that. And so, again, we're trying to honor the history while doing something new, and that's really it. If I hate that people are upset about it, but on the flip side,
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud of the work we've accomplished with it. And again, I think, like everything with Siege was a learning process, finding your sort of footing with the show. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, everything with this entire series, the trilogy, gets better and better as it keeps going. And, you learn those lessons as you go.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody stop DMing me.
That's not going to work, FJ. Sorry.
Yeah, it never worked. I got more now.
Good try.
Yeah.
Change is hard.
Yeah, but we're not trying to force it. You know what I mean? We're not. It's not like Optimus is completely different, blah, 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 but that's a whole other conversation.
If there's one thing you can say about Transformer fans, is they don't really like change.
No,
I know,
which is ironic.
but I say this as a fan also. Like you end up in that sort of rock and a hard place of, I understand that mentality. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and on the flip side, it's like, how do you push the franchise forward, even though it's a series that's very respectful of G1 in particular, but again, like everything, and you guys, like I said, you guys have seen Earthrise. You see now, especially if you get into this middle act, there's a long game here where we are shifting gears. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, Earthrise isn't G1. You've got all the, I'm obsessed. I read all the comments. I read everything. Matt has to yell at me. But I'm sitting there where people go, there's no Earth in, these Earthrise trailers. Well, Earth's got to rise, pal. Like, give it a little bit, let it get there,
Yeah.
It's a journey, it's like, but I sit there going, oh shit, should we have gone to Earth like in the first episode? But they have an expectation of G1, which which I get, but we're also trying to do something new with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like the whole, like, I think at least the way that the toy line was presented just contrasts with what the show is doing. The show to me feels like the entire 3 parts are a prequel to G1, whereas maybe the toy line with the second toy line being called Earthrise, maybe I think a lot of people thought, well, Siege is the prequel, and then Earthrise is on Earth, and then Kingdom is the future. And I think that's where people are maybe getting confused, where I think the whole show taken as a whole is still a prequel to G1. At least that's how it feels to me.
Yeah, I think that's a valid thing. I would say even through Kingdom, it's a prequel to G1. And it becomes this, I can't, nobody, well, how do you phrase this without insulting anybody? We didn't want to remake G1. You know what I mean? We've got to do something different with it and be, respectful of what's come before. And to be quite honest, when, Siege is very close to the toy line, as you guys know.
Yeah.
And as it keeps going, it's sort of, we're not as loyal to the toys in Earthrise and Kingdom simply because we were so far ahead of the toy line. I mean, we do it all in sync with Hasbro, but for example, we made a big deal about how toy accurate, the first season is, the second season is like that, third season less so because we were so far ahead. Like it's going to be our versions of the Beast Wars characters, et cetera. I mean, they look the same, like it's all based on designs Hasbro gives us and all that stuff. But by the very nature of Hasbro saying, "Hey, we're going to do a toy line where the G1 characters and the Beast Wars characters meet," you can't have G1 in this.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Like that goes, I even, at one point, I shouldn't say this in public, but I even had to argue with them at one point, Hasbro, about that from a couple of story points. And this will be the thing, as I always tell Matt when I'm doing like, TFCon when I'm like 75 in Burbank at the Burbank Marriott. I can tell all the stories. And there's not a lot of drama before because Hasbro has been great throughout the whole thing. But there are certain times where they push back on certain story things. And you're sitting there and you have to say to them, like, you wanted these different characters to meet. So by doing that, G1's got to go over here. Like we got to, we can't get there yet.
Like you said, it's a multiverse. It's, anyone that's read comics knows you can have an Earth here where everything happens one way and then another one here where, completely like one little thing changed and then the entire future of the characters are different.
Yeah, here's the thing. I can't really speak on that till you watch Kingdom. And
careful,
I have to be careful, but like we have carefully thought out an explanation of how they meet. Like again, and some of that is in Earthrise. Like when you get to Kingdom, you sit there and go, oh, they pay off this thing in Earthrise and all this. And that's where it gets tricky. And we had to do a lot of long-term thinking. And, a lot of that has to do with there are sort of three writers and one I'm not going to name yet because that writer needs to be announced for Kingdom. But Gavin and Tim, who are the writers on this second series, Gavin sort of came from Siege into this. And then Tim comes in. And then, when we get into Kingdom, somebody else comes in and Gavin went off to do another show for Matt and I, which is not Transformers related. We had to sit there and sort of map it out because, to be quite honest, when we sort of developed the trilogy in the beginning, Kingdom, like Siege had a lot because that was the immediate one we were going to write. Earthrise, we sort of had the outline of, okay, we're going to do this, that, the other. We sort of knew that. And then Kingdom, we sort of went, we just sort of know this. They're all going to meet. Shit goes down, and we got to get them to do this, and it becomes a tricky thing. And I'm a DC Comics kid. I think we talked about this last time. So I love multiverses. I grew up with Crisis on Infinite Earth. So like there is a mentality of like, here's how you do this. Here's how you do that. But to be quite frank, the multiverse exploration of this is very minimum. I just want people to have that sort of leveled expectation of, yes, there's going to be an explanation. I'm actually proud of what the writers pulled off and how clean it is and how it works. And I'm saying this literally, Matt and I an hour ago were on a call with Japan sort of going over the very last episode of the whole thing, and sort of going, okay, we pulled this off. I'm proud of the journey that the writers came up with and how to do that multiverse. And I think in a way that's really satisfying. Sorry, I ramble on like I always do.
No, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to it. So with before we move on to Earthrise, I did just touch on a couple of points in Siege because I really thought one of the things that I was really impressed with Siege was, as always as a Transformers fan, as a fan of genre media, science fiction, sci-fi, it's fantasy, all that stuff. You always want more than what you're given, So when it's announced originally, 6 episodes, that's it, 6 episodes, no more. I mean, how are we going to get a whole story in 6 episodes? And I really want to commend you for how much you packed in these 6 episodes. I really thought you were able to tell a really multi-layered story. You you touched on a lot of different character arcs, and I was just surprised at how much you were able to pack in those 6 episodes. So
thank you.
And in particular, Megatron's story arc. Just as you show him, at the beginning, he's the bad guy, but he's still kind of the honorable villain. You can see how him and Optimus Prime used to see eye to eye. Now they diverged, but they still respect each other. And then by the end of Siege, I think you've taken him down a path, and I think in his eyes, his actions are justified. But you've taken him really towards the where he's the irredeemable, evil Megatron that we got in G1. So I just wanted to ask you how you mapped out that arc for him.
I'm trying to think now. I mean,
So long ago now.
Yeah, no, because when we did, and again, I know people don't like the Prime Wars, and like I said, I'm one of them. But the third one, Power of the Primes, which was the only one Matt and I were really like involved in from the ground up in terms of development, production, all that stuff, and we were sort of working with what we were handed in the previous two. Was sort of in our mind the end of the Megatron arc. He sort of disappears at the end of that and all that. And we were sort of in our mind sort of backtracking, like, who is he at this point? And it's same with Optimus. And I think it was written for Marnoka, who we knew could pull off the emotion. And you see in Earthrise the guilt of his decisions from Siege really start to kick in. And that escalates even more in Kingdom. I mean, look, the dude's talking to the head of Ultra Magnus.
Spoilers.
What? No, I can do that. So
I guess we could go into Earthrise.
Yeah. So sorry. So when we mapped it,
it's okay. We're 25 minutes in. It's okay.
When we mapped it, it was knowing that eventually, no matter what happened, there's G1 is all the way over here. So he needs to end up being that mustache twirling, cool 80s villain that we know it. So why not give him, some sort of depth to it? And, and there's a lot to explore with that in that gray area of, and again, I'm really proud of what we do with Earthrise. And it was always sort of, it was mostly mapped by really early on, sort of, George Christic and I, when we really sort of broke down that initial treatment, was sort of, how do you really explore that gray area, the Decepticons? And the moment was always going to be him pulling the trigger on Ultra Magnus was a bridge too far. And how do you do that after that? And it's hard to not have fun with Megatron. You know what I mean? Like, he's always the easier character to write versus even Optimus. And like Matt said, it's so long ago now. Like, I don't remember, but those things just sort of all fell into place really easily. In terms of, we knew he was going to kill Magnus. We wanted these moments, like in the first episode of Siege, where like he actually offers Wheeljack and Bumblebee to join them. Those little things all were little moments that would sort of create this sort of more three-dimensional character, as opposed to just, kill them all, which we get to by the time we get to the end of Siege. And it's sort of, can I talk Earthrise yet? So anyway, so like,
go ahead. Go ahead. Spoilers, everyone. Spoilers.
When we get into Earthrise, he's sort of dealing with the multiple levels of guilt of, he's stuck on the planet right now, and he feels responsible for everybody, which is, when he goes to visit the manufacturing plants and all that stuff. Like, we wanted that, but and then there's a lot of interactions with Elita, which are some of my favorite scenes in Earthrise. But then the second, and you find he's struggling with those two versions of himself until, of course, the word comes in, Optimus is alive, and he's just like, forget it, I'm going to go kill this guy. Mm-hmm. And he's still doing it under the guise of, I'm going to get the Allspark and save the planet. I think there's still some part of him with that I think, just as he continues to give more and more into the madness of his quest, he sort of forgets that, and and is now more that Megatron who, I'm just going to wipe everybody out and dominate everything, because the other ways don't work. And I think he learns some of that lesson when Magnus doesn't pull the trigger on him in Siege, which is a big moment. It shows, he even says, "Oh, Magnus, you should have pulled the trigger." I think that's a big moment for him because he would have pulled the trigger at that point, if the situation was reversed.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question. It's just another long-winded exploration of Megatron.
Well, I guess maybe we should transition into Earthrise, since that's the new hot thing that's out right now, and I think there's a lot of burning questions there. I mean, just as you mentioned, Elita 1, I wanted to touch on that too, because at the end of Siege, I was like, oh well, okay, you've shifted the focus to the Ark doing something out in space, so are we even going to get back to Cybertron? And I was very pleasantly surprised to see that the first episode of Earthrise is all on Cybertron for the most part, and it's all focused on Elita 1 and her team, and basically left to pick up the pieces of what's going on Cybertron with the loss of the Allspark, and as you mentioned, Megatron descending further into his committing atrocity after atrocity now, like not just against the Autobots, but even against his own Decepticons. And I really liked how you pushed things further and made them more extreme in that episode. And then Elita 1 becomes even more prominent than she was in Siege, which I also thought it was great to have her be such a strong character in Siege and now in Earthrise as well.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a couple of things with that. Is I pushed very hard early on for Elita to be in the show. I think I mentioned this last time, this series, and Hasbro had no problem with it. They were sort of like, "Oh, I don't know, we don't know if we're going to do a toy of her, but you can do whatever." And then they started to read the scripts and thing, and went, "Oh, wow, this is a really cool character." And I always wanted, a stronger female character in a prominent position in the show. The honest to God truth is the first episode of Siege is sort of loosely connected to the last moment of Earthrise is sort of loosely connected to the last moment of Siege, which the Ark floating in space and intruder alert. I wanted that to be a post-credit sequence. So I wanted the show to end on Elita and company with the idea of, and this is me being sort of naive and sort of a idealistic thing, like nobody will figure this out, the idea was like you ended on that team of Elita, Jetfire, like this is your new Transformers, this is your new Autobot. The show's going to be about this, and they think everybody's dead, and I wanted to just have the Ark floating as like a post-credit thing, but Netflix doesn't do post-credit things on their TV shows, so I had to sort of just edit it back in, right? So that's the true story. So the idea was that you would watch the first episode of Earthrise and think, oh shit, this is really like Optimus and company aren't coming back. And it was just me being until the very end. And you realize now it's sort of a good hook for a streaming show to sort of go, oh, there's Optimus and the mercenaries. We got to find out what happens to them. So we really wanted to focus on, Elita and company in the beginning of Earthrise. But then there was also a realization of how cool the character was and how great the actor is, Lindsay. And, wouldn't this be fun to have her sort of up against Megatron at this point and make them like, the honest to God truth is there's sort of like like this just like little terrorist cell at the beginning of Earthrise because there's so few left. And there was something really intriguing about that they were going around freeing Autobots and prisoners and things like that. There was a lot of fun with that, and a lot of that wasn't in the original sort of planning. The original planning was like, hey, we're going to space, and then Megatron's going to find out, and it sort of evolved in the writing of, oh, there's a lot of rich material that we could sort of explore here with Elita, and it also serves Megatron. And they spoke to their past. Where he calls her Ariel, and she talks about. You were, she sort of hints like I knew you back in the day and all that stuff. Like I think it served those characters really well to do that. And what we were talking about before with Megatron, I think it really enhances his character. Where, again, he goes back to, I'm going to recruit you, like you come with us. Like he has a respect for her that I really like. So yeah, I'm really happy with, again, I was really naive to think like people will think like, oh, Optimus and company are really dead. Even if we have the floating ship, it's just me being stupid, but I do like the way Earthrise, those 6 episodes sort of lay out. Like I think they, we got the 2-parter in between all that, and then go right into the Dead Universe stuff. I think Elita becomes the leader that we never really got to see. You know what I mean, on Cybertron. That's what I find enjoyable about a lot of what happens there.
Well, I think the elephant in the. Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was going to say the sort of the elephant in the room too was like, I remember when we were all done with Siege and we were just figuring out what Earthrise was going to be. I think the big question was like, what happens to Cybertron without the Allspark? And like, I think it would have been a disservice to immediately jump to space in the first episode. Like, I think we really needed to spend time to go like, oh, this planet is in real trouble. Like, they are done for if they don't do something. So we really wanted to establish those stakes of like what Optimus had done and the ramifications of that.
Yeah. And that also, to Matt's point, serves the Optimus character. But I mean, you'll see, we intentionally never say how long it is in between the 2 shows.
Mm-hmm.
Like we never, like even Optimus at one point says Double Deal, like, how long have we been out? And Double Deal is like, it doesn't matter. And,
that was going to be one of my questions. So I guess you're not going to answer that, huh?
No. And, at one point we were sitting there floating different. It's not 10 minutes late. It's not, Last Jedi where it's like, this just happened 5 minutes later. You know what I mean? like, we wanted it, like, especially as you start to see, like sort of like the way we described it and talked about it with our director was Cybertron. And again, this is what Matt was saying. What happens how long has that power source been gone? Like, how do you survive off that? And that was sort of a big thing in terms of, we're going to start the nuclear winter here. Like that was always the phrase, was like, it's got to be like a nuclear winter. It's got to be, something that shows. And that's why we kept a lot of familiar places so you could see sort of the discrepancy. And, you'll see in the skies where it's like almost like this like pukish yellow to a degree, or green kind of thing. Like it's a planet dying at a clip. And, and you're sort of, if you have the frustration of Megatron, who is trying to, figure out what to do. And, but also Elita sort of going, how do we just survive at this point? And to Matt's point, I totally forgot all that stuff. Like that's part of the expansion of that Cybertronian storyline. The subplot was supposed to be, here's the result of what Prime did. And, and meanwhile, Prime has no idea, of the ramifications of that. And there's still curveballs to come with that. That sort of the ramifications of Cybertron. There are big payoffs with that, and big ramifications that hopefully Daryl hasn't figured out by looking at a card game. But it's important to the show to, and to Matt's point, I guess we didn't realize it at the time, is we did need to see what was going on in Cybertron, and it expanded that subplot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one thing also is neat is like the connection between Elita 1, Megatron, and Optimus. Like both Elita and Megatron had a significant reaction when they realized Optimus was alive. Megatron went into his rage and, it accelerated the whole Nemesis project so he could go after Optimus. Elita, it kind of gave her some hope to keep fighting. And then Optimus, when he was told by Megatron, like Elita had died, like immediately, that almost drove him into a rage to abandon his morals and kill Megatron. So it's a neat little kind of trifecta you have here and how they're all intertwined.
Yeah. The idea was always, at some point, they were all disciples of Alpha Trion in some way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? And we get into that in the show. But and Magnus was part of that gang, and I think by doing that, as opposed to just, hey, you're Autobots and Decepticons and we just hate each other, it gives it a layer of emotion, and that's why I really like the interactions between Megatron and Elita early on in Earthrise. Like I really enjoy that dynamic, and because you get a little bit of both of them and different sides of that, and it's almost like, and I'm not saying this was the intention, but sort of like, Megatron was always jealous of Optimus having this woman at his side, kind of thing. Like, maybe did he have a crush on her at some point, or something like that. I mean, obviously we would never go that deep with it, but you sort of get the idea. Was there some sort of triangle with that at some point?
Yeah.
And to be honest, when to Jimmy, what you're saying is when he tells Prime that Elite is dead, he doesn't actually know that. Like he's actually bullshitting Prime at that point. He's trying to provoke him, which I sort of love. And
yeah, I mean, he pauses a long time before he's like, "She's dead, I assume."
Yeah, even though he's all messed up in this explosion, he's got to push the button. He's got to push the button. Like he physically can't do it at that moment, And of course, he goes and double crosses him 5 minutes later. But he has to push that button because he knows every button to push on Prime, and at a certain point, you start to see Prime knows what buttons to push on Megatron. That was a big thing too. Is Prime is sneakier than you realize, where he sort of knows right when to get Megatron riled up and get the truth out of him.
Yep. Definitely, I felt like you. I mean, it was subtle, but I still felt like that. The hint of a love triangle was telegraphed a little bit in that interaction between Megatron and Elita, especially referring to her as Ariel, and I think you can read it a lot of different ways, but I think it's just subtle enough so that it's open to interpretation for either way. Yeah. So I think that I think that's a good ambiguous way to leave it there, and good storytelling for people to either write their own fanfics or go off in their own speculation.
Matt, did we talk about that when we were developing it? I don't remember.
I don't think so. I think that subtext just sort of developed on its own. I don't remember that being like a specific mandate.
I don't think the love triangle thing was, but I mean, there was definitely in our minds, there's that established past of the students of Alpha Trion, and she's part of that.
Well, I have a question about the I don't know, the writing of the first little bit of this. When you mentioned, I'll take us back a bit here. When you mentioned that, the Elita and her band of Autobots are essentially a terrorist cell to the Decepticons here. Was there any thought in the writing of this episode to flip the script on episode 1 and write it as though the Decepticons are getting their shit fucked up by this band of Autobots all the time, and you're writing it from the point of view of the Decepticons?
I feel like that would have been hard given the actions that they take at the end of that episode. Like, I think in Siege we could have definitely taken that approach, but I feel like the Decepticons have made decisions now to keep Cybertron alive. They're doing what they have to do, but I think that would have been, I mean, it's a really interesting angle, but I think we would have had a hell of a time justifying that, considering, the mass execution we see at the very end to suck the energon out of them. So
it's an interesting way to try and flip the script to try and bring the audience to understanding why the Decepticons are frustrated with this band of Autobots, and then you bring it back in the episode 2 to 6, you're back with the Autobots, or you use part of 2 to flip it back over, right? But you're right, the end of 1 it's kind of a hard turn on that on them there.
Once you bring in genocide,
Yeah. Even though Megatron's reluctant, he still gives the okay at the end of the day. So it's hard to redeem that.
Yeah.
It's one of those, to Daryl's point, if we had 10 episodes or more, that's one of those fun things we can just do an episode of this. Like what's their POV? Again, all these have been approached like mini movies more so than, and this is the unusual one, meaning Earthrise has the one like genuine two-parter, which I think is the only two, we don't do that in Kingdom. Kingdom's more like Siege, where it's like, it's one long, movie length story.
You could have used Sound Blaster again, FJ.
What? You
could have used Sound Blaster again.
Don't think I didn't
stop
try. Don't think I didn't try. I get emotional.
A lot of people are going to be very upset that Sound Blaster doesn't come back.
Again, someday when I'm at the Burbank Marriott in my 70s, I'll worry about how I tried to bring Sound Blaster back, but not.
You definitely did on several occasions. I remember.
Yeah. Let's be clear. I looked into, and creatively, it just never worked. And there was one instance where Hasbro went no, because I wanted to bring somebody else in, but that's a whole other thing. But it wasn't from a lack of trying. We've got the mercenaries in this one. We've got the fun gang in this one. We've got, the double killers version of the mercenaries in this.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the whole desolation of the planet, and this is due directly to Optimus Prime's actions. I mean, I think this is something where we don't see Optimus Prime having quite the hero arc that he usually does. Like, I mean, this is something where it's carrying on from the end of Siege. It's clear that, I mean, we can say both Optimus and Megatron have responsibility for the destruction of Cybertron here, and Optimus Prime, arguably, you could say he makes a really terrible decision in just sending the Allspark off of Cybertron, and the consequences of that are in full force in this in Earthrise, and this is part of his story arc, his guilt, his doubt, and then everything coming back to haunt him. So how did you structure that? I mean, it feels like you structured this arc in Earthrise to parallel or mirror the arc that Megatron had in Siege. Would that be accurate?
I don't think we sat there and said, oh, it's got to be like Megatron and Siege. I think, again, and we're cognizant of the fact that people were, frustrated with Optimus and Siege as sort of like, not being the hero that we know, right? And the problem is, I've said this a bunch of times in a bunch of interviews, and I apologize, is the problem is if you start Optimus as the legendary hero of Cybertron from the beginning, what do you do with him after? Right? Like, where do you go with him? So what we wanted to do with this was put him on the precipice. And you see when you get into Earthrise, look, everybody, especially the Autobots in Siege are desperate. They're desperate. They are inches away from becoming extinct. And literally, this is the Hail Mary move that when he throws that into the space bridge, it's not a lot of thought behind it. He's surrounded. That's it. Like, this is the only thing I'm going to do, because doing that's better than Megatron getting it and converting us all into Decepticons, right? Mm-hmm. When we get into Earthrise, he does have an understanding of that, and he in my opinion, especially when he gets to, I think he learns a lot from Skylinks in that Dead Universe episode, in terms of remember who you are, remember what you're supposed to be. Here's why the Matrix chose you. And I think that's a big moment. But I even think before that, he's stepped up more into the leadership, where you see how he deals with Decius, you see how he deals with Scorponok. it's those bits and pieces now are falling into place. And when we get into Kingdom, spoiler alert, he's much more the leader. He's much more, I'm in charge here. Matt's laughing because he's like, wait, you got to wait. Yeah,
Careful.
So,
the lines.
I think you'll start to see, he's dealing with the guilt of it, and that guilt, that him and Megatron are both dealing with the guilt. You've got Megatron dealing with the guilt of, I'm killing my own people to survive, to keep this planet alive. That's why he goes to meet the citizens and and meet all these people. And then the one thing that sort of slips under the radar is, I slip under the radar as if people have seen the show. But the one thing, we worked really hard on was the whole thing with Scrapface, which was this whole Autobots and Decepticons working together kind of thing. And the realization of like, now we're learning a little bit more about the ground level of the citizens of Cybertron and what they're going through. Megatron's just as sympathetic towards what's going on, but also out of touch with what's going on. Because, Elita is doing a better job uniting everybody than Megatron or Optimus ever did. And I think that's a big thing. And I hope people understand that when they watch it. Because I really dig Scrapface, but I also really love, Matt, what's the name of the one-legged guy that Tadaro plays?
Shamble.
So that's the guy like that Megatron meets at the factory. He's got the one leg. That's Frank Tadaro doing it again. Like Frank
doing such a good character too. It's brilliant.
So the characters we came up with, like that could speak to the experience of like, you have these Decepticons who think they're still manufacturing things for the war. The war's over. You know what I mean? Like, and Megatron doesn't want to pull these guys offline and put them into the, the spark sucking device. I don't know. Did we ever name it? I don't know. We named it.
I don't think we did.
The Nemesis Project, sort of thing. And it becomes this interesting thing of how far Megatron now has gone, and we know Optimus would never do that. Optimus would give his own life versus, that. Mm-hmm. And we sort of see that in this. And it becomes this evolution of the two of them by the time they sort of reconvene, at the space station, the old shit between the two of them comes back. And I really enjoy it for that. Especially when Megatron double crosses them. So I don't know if that answers the question, but you get the idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I really maybe we can jump to, you mentioned the Dead Universe, because that was also a big surprise for me watching this show and seeing that concept brought into it. I mean, that episode also brought a whole lot of Transformers lore to the forefront. You got the Dead Universe, you've got Skylinks, you've got spoiler Galvatron and Unicron, you've got the Hate Plague. I mean, this was like a smorgasbord of Transformers lore and concepts and history all packed into that one episode. Alpha Trion, I can't forget Alpha Trion. He was there too. I mean, that's so. I mean, how much fun did you have putting all that together? Like, and then that that gets a prominent showing in the trailer. So people are going crazy, like, what? Galvatron and Unicron are already here? What are you guys doing? But then, we see that it's actually really a small part, and it's time travel wobbly stuff. So it's not it's not super prominent, but I really thought that was a good way to pack in more Transformers backstory and history, but still stay on your main narrative.
Right. The Dead Universe episode, which is the one there's two episodes, as Matt knows, I've been scared out of my mind with when we developed the entire series. The first one was the Dead Universe episode. The second one is the first episode of Kingdom, which obviously I can't get into. And the Dead Universe one, long in advance, we knew we were going to the Dead Universe. We knew Skylinks was going to be in there.
Yeah, we had certain characters that we knew we were going to meet there. We just didn't know the how, I think.
Yeah, we like, and we knew it was going to set some things up for the end of that series and queue up a lot of stuff for Kingdom. And I don't think we knew Unicron was going to be in it until we developed it. And what it really was always to be about was this sort of, not pause in the series, but this sort of moment of Megatron and Optimus sort of being put in these positions of these are your potential futures, right? Hence Nemesis is in it. But I think as we kept going, and I don't know if this was in the treatment, and Matt might remember better than I do, was to make Galvatron part of it. Like Galvatron somehow gets there. And and then that sort of fell into place. Like we always knew Galvatron was going to be in the show. Like there was always, really early on, Hasbro had said, we're going to do something with it's going to be a Galvatron toy. And we were just like, great. Like we're going to find a way. Like we always wanted that moment, even if it was small or not, the Galvatron Megatron meeting. We knew we didn't want to turn Megatron into Galvatron. Like that was very clearly established from the beginning. Like that's been done. We don't want to, do that again. So. Right. And but that was the real moment of, and you got to really, the Skylinks, we sort of, we did our homework on Skylinks and sort of went, well, he's really arrogant. He's this, he's, all these things. And there was an understanding, I think, as we started to develop the season, that Skylinks would be a really good example for Optimus of, here's someone who the wrong reasons wants the Matrix and learns from it. And, and then there were fun Easter egg things like the hate plague and all that stuff. That just all sort of fell into place as we kept going. But we wanted, that Dead Universe episode is going to be seen as, by the time you watch the whole thing, like a really crucial sort of thing for both Siege, Earthrise, and Kingdom. And in my opinion, for the franchise as a whole, as it keeps going. We wanted to show, again, like I know Gavin had sort of really, like we sat really early on. Like we always knew Gavin was going to write that episode, right? And we were going to sneak those things in there. And we snuck stuff in there, like there's the floating, if you really look, the floating Megatronus statues and is Solus in there? Did we keep Solus in there?
Solus Prime is in there.
By the way, those are all our models from Power of the Primes and stuff like these are little things we snuck in there. So like the staff that Alpha Trion has is the Solus staff, her forge from Power of the Primes. Like, we sort of like, how do we sneak all these little things in there and make it, and then we have a lot of flashbacky stuff.
You have Galvatron's introduction, which is straight out of the 86 movie. Yeah.
And that was the idea, was like, how do you tie that little bow around all that and connect the history of it? To sort of say, and also what Galvatron's motivation is, like, I want you to do this, I need you to do that, and all this stuff like that. That's really essential. But, the interesting thing is, I feel like Megatron sort of comes out of it only knowing one thing, like, I got to get the Matrix, right? He doesn't know why, etc. But Prime learns a real lesson. Like the tale of Skylinks is the real lesson for Prime, and he's able to embrace that. That's like sort of when the Matrix lights up at the end and points the way out of the dead universe and all that stuff. Like that's sort of his sort of next moment of his evolution as a leader and as a hero. Like it's Skylinks being the example of, like, because when he meets him, it's sort of hostile in the beginning. Like, you're not going to get the Matrix. You were banished here for a reason, and Skylynx's redemption is a real lesson for Prime in that episode. And we snuck a bunch, the honest to God truth is, Matt, tell them why the flashback to 86 movie is in it of Dead Optimus.
Oh, well, because they made the figure of it.
Yeah, so the one thing, like they never ask us for anything, right? They never ask us for anything. And they just said, listen, we're going to do a Dead Optimus figure. I said, what? So we're going to do the Dead Optimus. And we said, okay. And they're like, can you find a way to somehow show that? And we always said, we're going to have that in the Dead Universe episode. We'll have Optimus looking down at, like, that's one of his potential futures. Nemesis is another one of his potential futures. And Megatron is sort of confronted directly by his potential future. And you sort of, and then you look at their past from multiple point of views. Like, I love the way they sort of show them in the pits and the way they light all that. That was all the Polygon team. And, this was the moment to cram a lot of lore into it, but also, the intention of, okay, this might not go the way, like, everybody's expecting this to end with G1 exactly as you know it. It might not go that way. You know what I mean? Like, this is where we got to throw in all these fucking curveballs. And the Dead Optimus, by the way, which they couldn't call Dead Universe Optimus because Amazon wouldn't carry a word with dead in it. But that's your little what's it called? What did they end up calling
Alternate
it?
Universe.
Yeah, like they wanted to call it Dead Universe and they couldn't call it that.
That plays into your whole multiverse thing.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
Yep.
As Skylynx says, the future is unwritten. That line of dialogue is very intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, the Dead Universe sort of gives us an opportunity to sort of take the whole thing in a different direction. You know what I mean? Like, I don't remember, we did a lot of research on the Dead Universe and we just sort of realized, we'd say to Hasbro, well, what do you guys want the Dead Universe? Well, whatever you want. They were very sort of reasonable with that. But it really, what the entire point of that episode was always to advance Megatron and Prime in a way that said, these are your possible futures, these are your possible outcomes. And they each had a respective narrator, whether it's Skylynx and Galvatron serve as those respective narrators of getting those two characters more to their classic versions, by the time that's over. And the other thing was sort of, was for Prime, by the time it's over, he understood he had to step to this other level, which is why the Matrix sort of lights up and helps him guide the way. And Skylynx says, remember who you're supposed to be. This is why the Matrix chose you, is, it's literally him now leading the path out and forward to conclude, to go to the next step on their mission.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like Earthrise, I mean, with the Dead Universe episode, you kind of got us into the futures, potential futures. And then in earlier episodes, you also took us back to the past with the Quintessons. Like you really, as you emphasize the role that the Quintessons played in Cybertron and the Transformers history. And I really enjoyed those kind of bookends. One question I had about the Quintessons, and also I want to thank you for setting the record straight with them being Quintessons and not Quintessons. I mean that. So I really
Hasbro. I asked them, and that's what they said.
Yeah, I really love Cyberverse, but the one thing I couldn't stand about Cyberverse was they called the Quintessons Quintessence. That really rubbed me the wrong way. So thank you for setting the record straight, correcting them, and making them Quintessons again. But the one thing with the Quintessons, it felt like at least Megatron when he's talking about the Quintessons, it felt like he might have been there. Like in your mind, do you think Megatron was there when the Cybertronians overthrew the Quintessons, or is that even before him and Optimus? Like my thought was that happened way in the past before Megatron and Optimus were even created. But when Megatron talks about it, it feels like he was there and leading the uprising. So what is your thought on that?
I don't think.
I always took it as like stories being passed down. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he was literally there, but I think, they all the Transformers metaphorically still, feel that fight of that rise up against the oppressors, and they still, I don't think he literally meant he was there. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, FJ.
No, I think you're right. And to be honest, it's more like how someone our age would talk about World War II. Well, we won the war. We're Americans, or something like that. I think it's more a historical thing. And I also think it's important that, because we sort of ran into this issue, and it's no fault of anybody other than Hasbro, of course, which is now you have the Allspark and you have the Quintessons. Who made what? How did everybody get here? So we sort of decided in the scripting stage to play up that debate, and sort of never really answer it. But the idea was always this guy, Decius, was the one who created the transformation cogs that are in our guys. Whether or not it's true, because you have Allspark, like we don't want to hear about this shit. You know what I mean? Like, so I think the Quintessons, even Optimus says, I know, I don't know who you are, but I know what you are. Like, and even the other Autobots are sort of like, oh, they were a myth, kind of thing. So I think to Matt's point, it's something that was long before these guys. I think that the key battle, if I can be nerdy, and we've not really explored it this first time sort of thing, is the Battle of Tarnhauser Gates is sort of whatever the crucial thing is for this generation of heroes, right? Optimus, Megatron, Trion, Elita, Magnus, etc. Because it's pre-Autobot Decepticon. It's all this. Who they're fighting, I have no idea. You know what I mean? Like, but the idea was that was their generation's war. And then the Quintesson, maybe Trion was there. You know what I mean? Maybe that was his generation stuff. But the idea, I think it's more Megatron is sort of speaking as a student of history kind of thing, and like, a soldier who understands the past of the planet and the liberation from the Quintessons. I think that's really important. Like, I would think that, my parents who were born during, just after World War II versus my nephew who's 22 would look at World War II very, very differently. You know what I mean? Like they would look at historical events. My nephew wouldn't understand Iraq. You know what I mean? Like, and me being my age has a weird sort of hazy view of Vietnam, so being born right during it or after it, et cetera.
Yeah.
And by the way, we try to keep these things vague, certain things, because you don't want to fall down the rabbit hole in the show and constantly have to explain like all this stuff. But then I would love to think, again, when I'm at the Burbank Marriott in my 70s, someone's written a comic book sort of going, well, this is what Tarnhauser Gates were. Oh, that's really cool. It's sort of like when we had Flint Dilley at the office and we were sort of going, well, we did, we took this from what you guys were doing. And he was just like, okay, whatever. But we didn't think of it that way. We probably overthink a lot of this stuff. But then at certain points, like I'm sure there's a lot of stuff we thought of that's not on the page or not even on the screen that we had to think of to get to that point.
I think some things are better left like for people to kind of, work it out in their own head.
Yeah.
Whatever their own personal head can.
Yeah. No, yeah, I really appreciated that. I mean, it's nice to have history reference, but you're not dumping exposition or anything, but you're throwing out little Easter eggs that us old school longtime fans were like, oh yeah, we caught that, but it's nothing that burdens a new viewer or burdens anyone with like, oh, there's some complicated backstory that I have to understand. It's little hooks that will get you interested in looking at other stuff, but nothing that burdens the narrative. So I think you struck the right balance there.
I think it helps to have, it's one of those things where it's like after you figure out the story, the Easter eggs make sense. Like sometimes the Easter eggs help you get to where, and that's the advantage of having these writers who were so good, Gavin and Tim, and, Brandon was really good at that in the first season, where like he understood the mythology really well. And that helped us, developing the mercenaries and things like that. And George in the beginning, when we sort of broke down the initial thing, that we had that framework to add those Easter eggs or create new ones. You know what I mean? Like, like we'd sit there and when we did the design for Tarnhauser Gates in Siege, which is a very elaborate, you don't really see all of it, but it's a really elaborate set that we developed, or the theater where they end up, we love that design so much where we meet Ratchet and Siege that we decided to make that the hidden base of the Autobots in Earthrise, just because we love the set. We love and it was, let's use the exterior more and all that stuff. It becomes these things of, while we're developing, how do we sneak these little things in there? And it helps when everybody loves it and we can sneak in Easter eggs that, like we were talking about before in the Dead Universe with Megatronus and Solus. It's a cute wink nod to Power of the Primes, but also if somebody notices that, like, that's a really cool thing. And if they don't notice, it's just a cool shit floating around.
Yeah, and I felt like you also were putting some, you get a little bit into some Greek mythology and maybe some Shakespeare as well. I mean, Odysseus, I'm guessing, is a reference to Odysseus, maybe, or do I have that wrong?
I believe that name comes from a Roman. Oh God, I can't believe I forget the name of what the head of the Roman Empire was called. What were they called? What was
Caesar?
Yeah, but what was the title? Emperor. So yeah. Decius is a Roman emperor. That's where that name comes from.
Okay.
Yeah, we had to go through a bunch of names. Tim Sheridan came up with that. And
okay.
We always knew we were going to have a Quintus on, and we had a sort of funny temp name, in the treatment. And then, when we got to it, we need to have a name. And Tim went and sort of came up with a bunch of names that we ran by Hasbro, because there was two things. One was, A, creatively does it work? B, can we clear it copyright wise? And Decius was the one everybody like. It just gave some weight to the character. Like, I thought Tim did a really good job with how to present Decius. But yeah, it was based on the Roman thing.
I just looked him up, and he has Quintus in his name. It's Gaius Messius Quintus Traianus Decius.
There you go.
And then we have with Megatron talking to Ultra Magnus's head. That definitely felt like a last poor Yorick.
That we always called it the poor Yorick moment. Like literally, like I don't remember where we came up with that, but I remember being in the room and sort of.
That was a Tim idea.
What?
That was a Tim idea.
That was like he's going to talk to the head. We just all right. We're going to have that Shakespearean moment.
I love the "Don't look at me that way" line.
That's very Tim. You guys at some point should get Tim and Gavin on to talk about this, because there's some funny. There's a lot of funny behind the scenes stuff like that.
Yeah, the Earthrise had a lot of humor in it that I thought was Siege was good, but humor in Earthrise really seemed to step it up a notch.
Yeah, and that's intentional. I mean, it's. When we developed it, it was always meant to, I don't want to say lighten up as it kept going, but, if you like the humor in this, you'll love Kingdom. Kingdom is the real fun one. Mm-hmm. But we also wanted to make them, like, we're out in space. Let's have fun with it. Let's get some humor to it. It was always supposed to be like, we always use Star Wars as a reference and all that stuff. And, we did the job in Siege of sort of establishing the conflict and the war. And we did, even though it's still called War for Cybertron, it's like, well, they're not on the ground fighting anymore. Let's change the tone. I enjoy Bumblebee a lot in this one, where he's part of the gang and, especially I think Tim brought a lot of humor to it. Tim's a funny guy, and he's written a lot of big stuff like Superman and all these things. Like, he knows the that adventure tone, and that's what we wanted in this one, was a little more that space opera adventure. We're going to different planets. We're seeing all these different things. And he's the one who, like, just brought a lot of levity to it. And, and I think we also decided at the beginning, like, oh, there'd be fun stuff. Like, it's in the trailer, Bumblebee's the ugly one, Bumble and Bug-Bite referring to that. You know what I mean? Like,
I was going to mention that one because I watched this with my 11-year-old daughter, and she loved that line. Like, she thought that was the best line in the whole show. She's like, he's the ugly one, but he's saying it and he looks just like him. It's the best. Yeah, that's the joke.
Yeah, there's the one of your, I don't want to say rival sites, but Kevin Lucas at Unicron texted me that after he watched it, he was watching it with his son, who I think is either late teens or young, like adult age. And there's the bit where Optimus goes, well, as Alphatron used to say, and they were just like, oh God, like, don't get into this. And sometimes you got to blow scrap up. And they said that was our favorite line. So, the humor,
yeah.
And again, I'm trying really hard not to jump into Kingdom because that's where my brain is. But, that humor carries over into the next one.
Beast Wars was a much funnier show, I think. Like, so that would be good that Kingdom kind of parallels it.
Yeah, I think look, Kingdom does do that, but I think for Earthrise, we saw an opportunity of, they're not they're desperate to find the Allspark, but they're not backs against the wall kind of thing like they are. We could do all that stuff on Cybertron and let. Because the Elita stuff is pretty dark, like the spark sucking and all this stuff. And, that's all relatively dark, but there's some fun adventure to it. You know what I mean? They're on the run, and Jetfire's still doing a lot of cool stuff. And,
Red Alert's cracking jokes.
I'm sorry?
Red Alert's cracking jokes.
Yeah. Like, is this
he's always alert.
Where it turns out I'm always alert. Those are certain things where we got it. And we were sort of like, but let's do it. Let's keep it in. Let's keep it lighter. And you got to understand, we're doing these 3 series. We don't have any audience feedback. Like, we can't change Kingdom. You know what I mean? So I'd like to think our instincts, because everybody's a fan of these things, as we evolve the show, as it keeps going, it's resonating to Daryl's point about the humor and all that stuff, and Red Alert, and the bit where a lot of people saw the trailer and go, I'm glad we have somebody who on our team who could fly, because we were sort of that came from the fact that they don't have anybody who could fly. You know what I mean? Like, let's play it up. Let's enjoy those moments a little more than I think Siege, we had to really set the table. But now we're starting to enjoy the meal quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's a complete 180 on Red Alert's character profile, because in the original 80s show, he was a neurotic mess, and here he's he's light and bubbly personality with a joke every now and then, which is good. So
yeah, he's got a little bit of Bones McCoy in him, in terms of little spark and sarcasm to it, and I like the way we developed the character.
Mm-hmm. So I do have one little tiny nitpick, and I know this is probably
that's for Matt who answers these.
I'm sure this is probably down to budgetary reasons and things that are hard to change. But I did notice that in the show, at least the characters who weren't necessarily based directly on toy models, they don't get a chance to transform. So, I really was hoping that we'd get to see Elita 1, RC, and Bumblebee transform at some point. And is there any hope for that in Kingdom?
Well, I'll let Matt answer these things.
I mean, no, that's the short answer. I wish we could, if we had it our way, every single character would transform all the time, but it's just not feasible. But
the problem,
we hear the feedback.
Yeah, we see it. I mean, we know. But the problem becomes then you can only have, if you want everybody to transform, then you can only have half the characters.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to realize we introduce a ton of characters in the first one. There's less in the second one. And a lot of that is because we're saving it up for Kingdom because, we don't want to shortchange the Beast Wars characters because they're so significant, right?
Right.
So, I mean, are you really going to have Optimus Primal not turn into an ape? You know what I mean? Like,
Soft confirmed, FJ. Jesus.
Well, that's the toy. That's so good. And again, I've always got to sell them out, but we put the onus on Hasbro to pick who did what, who transformed, which ones you could see on screen, et cetera. What was important to you guys, meaning Hasbro and all that stuff. And we sort of rolled with it. And that changed a little bit as we kept going. But look at Scorponok. You're not going to have Scorponok not transform, right? But on the flip side, Skylynx, why would you have him transform into a space shuttle? Like, then you got to explain that. You know what I mean? Like, so there are certain creative opportunities because then by not having Skylynx transform, someone else can.
Right.
And, I love Elita. She's the sort of big surprise blessing of the show. But when we developed it, she wasn't as prominent as we thought she was going to be. And she just evolved because the writing dictated that. And the actress dictated that. You know what I mean? Like,
I think if we had a time machine, we would have changed that.
Probably.
Yep. No, that's totally fair, and I figured that was the reason. So I'm not mad, but it's
no,
it's
I get it. Like I said, like Matt said, we follow what people say. I mean, the thing is, what I hate is people when they complain about us using redecoed characters. That's a tradition of the show. You know what I mean? And that gives us the opportunity to have multiple, the Mercenaries in particular were a lot of fun to do with that. You know what I mean? So, or even the soldiers who are working for Decius. You know what I mean? Like when they all come out, the idea was, Decius would have these prototypes saved as an army for himself. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of thought that went into that.
Was there any discussion of them maybe being Sharkticons at some point?
No, because that was never on Hasbro's list of characters.
Oh, okay.
That's a stupid question, Charles.
No, it's not a stupid question. No, it's not a stupid question because, the one thing I didn't want, again, if we had 10 episodes, we'd have Decius over a number of episodes and really get into Decius' story, but we don't. And people, the average Joe just goes, well, why couldn't you do that? Why couldn't they don't understand the mechanics of these things and what we have to go through to do that. And I'm not saying that as an excuse. I'm saying that as how do we take advantage of the opportunity of what we do have? And sure, I would love to have Sharkticons in it. You know what I mean? I would love to throw these guys into a pit and all that. But also on the flip side, it's like, that's 86 movie.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and this is, we're already doing enough homages. Then I don't want to get so deep that, you're not ripping stuff off, but, I wanted Wreck-Ar in it, but, Matt won't let me.
I didn't say no.
No, it's just
it would be difficult.
We're sort of always trying to keep it in the parameters of what Hasbro's doing with the toys and all that stuff. And, I do know now I probably, knock on something we do more in the future that I can push back a little more, or, sort of go, okay, we're doing this. And instead of doing these 50 characters, we're going to do 30 and they're all going to transform. They're all going to do this and make them all, really relevant and important to the show.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think we've taken a lot of your time, but thanks so much for spending time.
I got one more.
Yeah, I hear you. There's always this. There's always this guy. Matt, this is the question where I sort of lose my.
I remember.
I think you're fine. You're probably fine. But I mean, we kind of know what's happening with Kingdom in the fact that you teased Unicron, right? There's a big freaking toy coming. I mean, it would be kind of a waste if that didn't get some kind of, screen time. Are we going to see a some kind of a battle between Unicron and Teletran when he transforms?
I don't know where you get the idea that Teletran transforms. That's the first thing.
Yeah, that
So no, I'm not going to answer any of that. You
just have to wait and see. That's the answer.
Yeah, you got to wait and see with this, because I will tell you that the Unicron that you see in this series is the one that's the new toy. Like, we got all their models and data.
It's the worst kept secret in all of Transformers. I mean, come on.
I mean, that Unicron is so tricky. You know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty happy with how he factors into the show. I'm glad they sort of added him to the trailer, which was, I probably would have sat there and said, no, don't do it. But then when I saw the trailer, I went, oh, it's cool.
It's funny because I was watching some trailer breakdowns after having seen the whole series, and they're going on and on about how, like, obviously Galvatron and Unicron play so much into the series. I'm like, yeah, you're going to be disappointed.
Well, they may be.
Well, I mean, at least Earthrise. Yeah. But
see, the one thing is, there is as you guys know, there is a plan.
Yeah.
Right. There's a plan for everything. And, it's unlike Siege. I think there's a lot more in this one where you sit there and go, like, especially the Easter eggs and all the stuff that sort of, I'm sure at a certain point, Daryl has Kingdom figured out to a degree, and he's nice about it.
You gave us the biggest tip when we interviewed you last time for Siege, is you said, look to the toys.
Yeah, but I can't say that after a certain point. Like, that's the thing. It's like, the problem is, you got to understand, we did this when we developed the show, and I mentioned this earlier, and I've mentioned this a bunch of times, is the show is so far ahead of the toys, right, that you can follow the toys with Siege. And me, again, this is one of those, Matt said, the time machine moments. I probably never would have emphasized that too much, because then they did a bunch of characters in Earthrise that never show up. You know what I mean? Like, and we'd see the toys come in and go, who the hell is that? Like, because we're working off, we were working off of very early lists, and they change as they keep going. And the interesting thing is, I've talked more about Kingdom than I ever should have in this, is that, Siege was very much based on what they were doing with the toys at the time. Earthrise is sort of us sort of going, okay, here's where we want to take it in collaboration with Hasbro. And then Kingdom is sort of Hasbro knowing, okay, here's what they're doing in the show.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain things that don't, like, when you see a lot of the Kingdom promo stuff, like, okay, that guy's not in it, or this doesn't happen based on their promo art, because that's what they do internally. So it's less follow the toys, but you'll see the toys start to follow us a little bit more as it keeps going. That makes sense.
Well, I mean, Kingdom has an Earth mode Ultra Magnus, and we know that's at least unless you've got something really crazy planned for Kingdom, that's not happening.
Who knows?
Stuff, right? Timey stuff. I mean, you mentioned time machines 3 times during this interview. I'm assuming gigawatts in this thing.
Well, let me tell you something. If Gigawatts in it, then Sound Blaster is going to come back. It's a testament to Hasbro being really collaborative. And I'm not joking and this will be funny after you guys see Kingdom, but there are meetings now where they'll say, can you look at this box art? This packaging art, is this a spoiler or not? And they're letting us have some sort of on certain things, like, well, get that the hell out. Guys, like, you can't show that on the toy because we know the toys are going to come out so early. You know what I mean? Like, there are certain things that, we can't avoid. But on the flip side, there are certain things where I'm like, dude, I'd appreciate it. You don't have to, but they're very nice about it. And like Earthrise, when you buy the toys, the map.
Yes.
We did that in tandem with them. Like they said, we're going to do a map. Here's what it is. And then we sort of sat there and said, let's put this here. Let's put the dead universe here. Let's put Char here and all this stuff, and then anything else is a side mission, for the toys and all that stuff. But we had that map, 18 months ago hanging up in our office, sort of tracked. It's nerdy. So, but like when it comes up on the screen, the screen or the holo projector in the Arc Bridge, that's the same map. You know what I mean? Like, and, in other than us who really cares about that, but we love that sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like, the average person's going to watch it and be like, well, it's the map. Who gives a shit? But the funny thing is, who was it? Tadaro, who bought the toys and was like, oh my God, Dead Universe is like 6 months ago. He's like, dude, Dead Universe, they're going to spoil it. They're going to,
He's like, did you know about this? Or,
yeah. And I said, yeah, we did the map with them. Oh, okay. Like, like, it's just funny in terms of, again, we'll write a book about this someday, the making of all this. And it's just funny that we've been fortunate enough where we haven't had a corporation breathing down our necks and going, no, you got to do this, you got to do that, and all this stuff. For better or for worse, it's a show made by fans. Whether it's our gang in Japan or the writers and all that stuff, they genuinely like Tim for every writing session would show up with a different classic figure. Like whoever we were working on, like he'd show up with the classic Galvatron toy, or they'd show up with this, and we keep it on the table and sort of go, okay, this is our inspiration. We watch old episodes and all that stuff, and really, sort of think it through. Like, how do you sit there and make Scorponok mean something? There's a whole side thing, like he's got his own, by the way, I don't know, because somebody saw this differently. Scorponok has his own logo.
Yeah. He had his own fact. Yeah. It wasn't the Decepticon symbol. Yeah.
No. And that's, I think Hasbro, after I sort of lost my mind when I first saw the mercenary thing, we got to make more. We got to make more logos. Like even the Decius's soldiers have their own logo if you look close enough. Like the idea, at least to me, is I think the Quintessons created more than just the Autobots and the Decepticons that we know. Like there's more out there. There's more. Again, the Quintessons the Scorponok is just one example of that. Mm-hmm. And that's why he has such a visceral reaction about when you mention the Quintessons and all that shit. I think that's really important. How do you expand the universe a little bit more with this? And that was the whole intention of Earthrise, was to have Nebulon space station, this humongous weird looking thing, and space bridges and all that stuff that they're, we sort of dealt with it in Prime Wars with Caminus. We went to Caminus really briefly in Combiner Wars, which I was sort of, like when I wrote the initial episodes, I wanted to be like fully occupied Caminus, and the Combiner Wars were happening there, and what the hell was this? And we'd learned about these lost colonies, and then certain people were just like, nope, cut that and rewrite you, and all that stuff. Like there is a bigger world to this, and not just the multiverse. Like I love little bits and pieces like Skylynx's backstory. That flashback with Alpha Trion, I think, is really, really interesting.
Well, even in Siege, you have Bumblebee mentioned that before the war, he used to go watch races on Velocitron when the space bridges were open. So yeah,
that's such a Gavin thing. Like Gavin knows all that shit. Like he just like, I'm telling you, you got to have the two of them on because they're characters. They're really funny. They're much funnier than I am. And but they have like, they're steeped in it. Like they're really good at, once we figure out the story, and the narrative and the character stuff, like they know how to insert those little Easter eggs and little bits, because like that, you talk about that line about I used to travel for the racing. It's a great bit about the character. It's like what we talk about with Star Wars. There are always those multi-layered sort of things that expand the universe, but advance the story. It says something about the character. It says something about the world. It expands things. And if you don't know it, like, oh, it's a cool thing. I sort of get what he's talking about. But if you're you guys, it's like, oh shit, that they made this reference to this. You know what I mean? Like, and that's really important. And by the way, again, to be that guy who teases Kingdom, is the writer we brought in for Kingdom is very much of Matt's generation. So this writer understood all those little Easter eggs about the Maximals and Predacons and all that stuff. So like that fun sort of continues into the next one. But we try to sneak in as much as we can once we know the story and character has been established for that story. Brandon was really good at that on the first season, sort of getting those little fanboy moments in there.
Yeah.
It's tricky. Well, I hope you liked it, Earthrise.
Yeah.
It was good.
We did, yeah.
It was beautiful.
I mean, we can say it sucked while we're here.
Right. Just wait till we get Mike on the review.
I was hoping he was going to show up, but that's a whole other thing.
Is there anything you'd like to say to Mike before we wrap things up?
No, I got nothing to say to Mike because I'm worried about picking him off and him talking shit about Earthrise. I mean, yeah, look, we appreciate you guys letting us sort of come on and ramble. It's part therapy and it's part fun. You guys, as like last time, are the first people we've spoken to directly about the show. Like when we did our interview last time for Siege, you guys were the first ones I got to interact with who had seen it. And same thing now. You guys are literally the first interview we've done for Earthrise. So, it's good to hear sort of the feedback. I'm glad the Dead Universe episode played well. I'm glad Scorponok, all these things, resonate hopefully with the fan base and also aren't too foreign to newbies. I'm hoping, people who caught on to Siege will watch this and sort of continue on that journey.
Scorponok will get a big reaction from fans because it's not in the trailer. My daughter she loved the fact that it was this giant robot. She doesn't know his name off the top, but she just thought she knows the toy because I have it. And she's like, oh, it's the Scorpion guy. I'm like, yeah, here he is. Look at that. It was awesome. It was a great fight. And, it was a great scene, but yeah, it's not in the trailer. It's a complete surprise. And you don't know it's a great scene. And that'll play really well.
Yeah. And Skylinks too, I think.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Jeremy?
I said in Skylinks too.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't put them in the trailer. And again, Netflix is nice enough to always run the trailers by us, and we get to give notes and stuff like that. But I think for them, they wanted to emphasize, the action, because there's a lot more action in this, like fun, swashbuckly action, especially at Nebulon and all that stuff. And at the end, where everybody's just throwing down. But I think, putting Galvatron, Nemesis, and Unicron in it, I think really speaks to the audience and asks a lot of questions. And I mean, I'm over the moon with how Galvatron came out in particular. I'm really, Marnoka doing the Leonard Nimoy voice is just too good.
Awesome.
And I'll have to say, visually, it looked fantastic. I watched it on an Oculus thing, so I had like a virtual big screen, and it looked.
Oh wow, that's cool. Yeah, I think, and again, the Polygon Gang. I think getting out of Cybertron, allowed us to be more colorful and build these cool sets, and like the space station. I don't know if you guys noticed this. Decius's place is actually like a quintessence ship that's crashed into the ground and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like that stuff, like our director came up with, just like, I'm going to do it this way. And all this stuff. We're just like, oh my God, this is so cool. And, I think after Siege, I think everybody was feeling confident that we could add some new things by still being reverential to the franchise. And I think it's paid off.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm sad. I think if we kept you just a few minutes more, we'd get all the Kingdom spoilers we could ever want. But I guess that means I should wrap things up. One thing we do before we do like to end by doing our rapid fire questions. FJ's already done this, but Matt, we haven't put you through the gauntlet yet. So could you give us a couple more minutes to do the rapid fire questions?
Absolutely.
All right. So yeah, these are real quick. Say the first thing that comes to your mind. Don't think about it. Just answer each question. They're really short A or B questions. So
I'm gonna get judged so hard by FJ for some of these answers.
I did it last time, and I'm sympathetic.
All right, here we go. Autobot or Decepticon?
Decepticon.
Who is your favorite Decepticon?
Jetfire pre-turn.
Okay. Transformers live action movie 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or Bumblebee?
First one.
All right. I don't know if you read the Transformers comics at all, but would you pick between More Than Meets the Eye or Lost Light, the Robots in Disguise, Optimus Prime, Till All Are One, or the newest Transformers comic series that just rebooted?
More Than Meets the Eye.
All right. Yeah. There's my
some
favorite.
Great issues in that series.
Yep. Third party toys, yes or no?
No.
Okay.
We're not allowed. That's
Yeah.
we cannot speak of third party toys.
Cats or dogs?
Cats. Got 2 of them.
Oh, okay. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Chicken or steak?
Chicken.
Pepsi or Coke?
Coke. Well, can I pick Dr. Pepper? Is there a third option here?
Sure. Yeah.
Dr. Pepper then.
You can throw out anytime you don't like the options, you can throw out a wild card, whatever you like. Burger King or McDonald's?
McDonald's? Wendy's? Can we do a third option here?
Yeah,
let's do a third
Wendy's
option.
is fine. Yeah.
Okay.
History or science?
History.
Xbox, PlayStation, or Nintendo Switch?
Oh, PlayStation. I want to say no. Let's go Switch.
Okay. All right. PC or Mac?
Mac. All the way.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Is there a phone app that you can't live without?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
You can just delete every app off there. I'd be just fine.
Marvel or DC?
Marvel. Sorry, FJ.
Who is your favorite Marvel character?
Iron Man.
Okay. Stallone or Schwarzenegger?
Schwarzenegger.
Pixar or DreamWorks?
Pixar.
Is there a favorite guilty pleasure movie that you'll watch whenever it's on, whenever you see it streaming or on cable TV, whatever?
Oh, that's tough. Because I'm just going to name like things that wouldn't be considered a guilty pleasure. What's like
That's
some
fine.
trash? I'm trying to think of like trash that I like watching.
I guess these days you could probably include TV shows since they're all on the same services.
Well, it's not. The problem is I wouldn't. Guilty pleasure is tough. Okay, Great British Bake Off. Let's just go with that. I love that
All
show.
right. Fair enough. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Simpsons, Family Guy, or Rick and Morty?
None of the above.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Maybe
Is there a
Simpsons?
substitute you would pick? Yeah, you're definitely being judged. You are about to be found guilty.
For whatever reason, like adult animated humor just has never clicked with me. I don't know why. I know I need to watch Rick and Morty is the problem. I've only ever seen the first episode, so that's probably will fix this answer.
That was my answer, by the way, last time, because I don't like the other shows. I'm a Rick and Morty fanatic. I love it.
Yeah, I need to watch the show. Based off the pilot, I don't think I would pick it, but I got to watch the show.
All right. Walking Dead or Game of Thrones? This is probably an obsolete question at this point.
Well, no, it's actually more interesting now with all of the everything taken into account. Probably Walking Dead, although I'm like 2 seasons behind.
Okay. Sports, if you're into sports, NFL, MLB, NHL, UFC, NBA, or Premier League?
The Olympics.
Oh, okay.
I live for the Olympics.
Very
The weirder the
interesting.
sport, the better. Curling, I'll watch that all day and all night.
All right.
Here.
Hopefully we get the Olympics back in 2021. Well, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, hopefully
That'd
we're
be
in
nice.
Japan for that.
That'd be nice
Yeah.
also.
All right. Porsche, Ferrari, Lamborghini, or Volkswagen Beetle?
Volkswagen Beetle.
Oh, okay. He's not the ugly one, huh?
Not in my mind.
Last question: blonde, brunette, or redhead?
Redhead.
All right. Congratulations. You have fast list of rapid fire questions.
Well done.
FJ, do you think less of me now?
No.
Oh, thank God.
Same opinion.
I guess nothing else can do that at this point, right?
I'm of the same opinion. Unchanged.
All right. Well, thank you so much to Matt Murray and FJ DeSanto for spending the time with us. Really appreciate you coming on and breaking down Siege and Earthrise for us, and definitely we'll have to come back after Kingdom is out, and we'll have the final part of the trilogy to discuss. We're looking forward to
You'll have
that.
you'll have an unchained FJ at that point.
Yeah,
He's ready. He's ready for it.
Talk about everything.
Yeah, don't wait till you're in your 70s. Just
Leap 70.
Exactly.
And a shout out to our friend, your friend, and our friend Jim Simonic Jimmers. We saw him get a little mention in the credits this time, so that's awesome for him. And
He hasn't
we're
seen
so-
it yet. I'm very excited for him to see it. He knows, but
Yes, that was super cool.
Well, I do bounce
right.
a lot of shit from him, so he's good like that.
All right. Again, thank you to Matt Murray and FJ DeSanto. And this has been a special Transmissions podcast episode all about Netflix's War for Cybertron, Transformers War for Cybertron, Earthrise. This is already streaming on Netflix. Hopefully you've had a chance to watch it, and you should have watched it before you watch this interview. But if you didn't, go watch it. Go check it out. You can check out Transmissions podcast at our website, transmissionspodcast.com, and on our YouTube channel. So come listen to us. We do lots of Transformers themed podcasts every week. And we always talk Transformers, both the toys, the comics, the TV shows, everything. So check that out. And we can't wait for everyone to check out Earthrise and give your opinions and feedback. Let us know. So we'll sign off now, and thanks everyone for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of Transmissions. But just because this episode is over doesn't mean the Transformers fun has to stop. Join us and other Transformers fans on our Discord chat server by visiting transmissionspodcast.com/discord. If you would like to learn more about how you could support the Transmissions podcast, just visit transmissionspodcast.com/support. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
Okay, so now tell me what you really thought about Earthrise.